The company holiday party roared with laughter and clinking glasses. Emily Carter slipped through the door 20 minutes late, scanning the crowded ballroom for her name card. When she finally found it, a ripple of snickers spread across nearby tables. Her seat had been placed directly beside Daniel Brooks, the quiet single dad everyone dismissed as forgettable. Co-workers exchanged knowing glances. Someone whispered loud enough for her to hear. The matchmaking joke had begun. But none of them knew that the man they were mocking could silence the entire room with just a few words. Emily Carter pulled out the chair and sat down with as little movement as possible. The laughter around her had already shifted into whispers. She could feel eyes tracking her from 3 tables away. This was exactly why she avoided these events. Office parties were breeding grounds for gossip, and as a single mom who kept her personal life locked away, she had learned long ago that silence was safer than small talk. The less people knew, the less they could twist into entertainment during their lunch breaks. The man beside her did not look up. Daniel Brooks sat with his hands folded on the table, his gaze fixed somewhere past the centerpiece of white lilies and gold ribbon. He wore a simple gray suit that looked slightly too large for his frame. His hair was combed neatly to one side. Everything about him suggested someone who wanted to disappear into the background. Emily had seen him in the hallways before, always walking with his head down, always leaving exactly at 5 in the evening. She had never heard him speak more than a few words to anyone. A woman from accounting leaned over from the next table, her voice syrupy with false concern. "Emily, you made it! We were worried you wouldn't come. And look, we saved you a seat right next to Daniel. Isn't that thoughtful?" Her smile was wide and sharp. The 2 women beside her covered their mouths, but their shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. Emily forced a polite nod and reached for the glass of water in front of her. She took a slow sip, buying herself a few seconds. Across the room, the DJ was playing something upbeat and forgettable. People were already loosening their ties and kicking off their heels under the tables. The executive team sat near the front, their table decorated with an extra arrangement of flowers. The CEO had not arrived yet, but his name card sat prominently at the center. Daniel had still not moved. His hands remained perfectly still. Emily wondered if he had heard the comment, or if he had simply learned to tune it out. She wanted to say something, anything to break the tension, but every possible sentence felt too heavy. Apologizing would acknowledge the joke. Ignoring it would make her complicit. So she sat in silence and pretended to study the menu card in front of her, even though she had already lost her appetite. The first course arrived 10 minutes later. Waiters moved between tables with plates of salad and breadsticks. Emily picked up her fork and moved the lettuce around without eating. Beside her, Daniel did the same. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but it was loud in a different way. It announced to everyone watching that the joke had landed exactly as intended. A man from the sales department stood up, wine glass in hand, and called out across the ballroom. "Hey, Daniel, you're being awfully quiet over there. Don't tell me you're nervous sitting next to a beautiful woman." His words were met with a round of laughter and a few scattered cheers. Someone else chimed in. "Come on, man. At least introduce yourself. Make an effort." Emily felt her face heat up. She stared down at her plate and wished she could vanish. This was not the first time she had been used as a punchline. Ever since her divorce 3 years ago, people at work had developed an annoying habit of treating her romantic life like a group project. They set her up on blind dates with cousins and college friends. They asked intrusive questions about whether she was seeing anyone. They made comments about how hard it must be to raise a daughter alone, as if her competence as a mother was up for public debate. Daniel finally moved. He picked up his water glass and took a drink. His expression did not change. He set the glass down with the same careful precision and returned his hands to the table. Emily found herself studying his profile. There was something about his stillness that felt intentional, like he was choosing not to react, rather than simply failing to notice. She had always assumed he was shy or awkward, but now she was not so sure. The second course came and went. Emily managed to eat a few bites of chicken, though it tasted like nothing. The teasing had died down, but the damage was done. She could still feel the weight of attention pressing on her shoulders. People were waiting to see what would happen next, whether she would laugh it off or make a scene, whether Daniel would finally say something or continue to sit there like a piece of furniture. A younger woman from HR walked past their table and bent down between them, her perfume overwhelming. "You two are so cute together. It's like the universe knew you needed each other." She winked at Emily and then moved on before either of them could respond. Emily felt something twist in her chest. Anger, maybe, or humiliation. She was not sure anymore. She thought about her daughter, Lily, who was 7 years old and currently spending the night staying with a babysitter at home. Lily had asked her that morning why she had to go to a work party if she did not want to. Emily had told her that sometimes adults did things they did not enjoy because it was expected. Lily had frowned and said that sounded silly. Emily had agreed, but gone anyway. Now she was sitting at a table full of strangers who thought her loneliness was hilarious. Daniel shifted in his seat. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but Emily caught it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up briefly, and she saw a text notification before he put it away again. She wondered if he had a child, too. She wondered if he had somewhere else he would rather be. She wondered if he felt as trapped as she did. The DJ announced that dinner was over, and dancing would begin soon. A few people moved toward the open space near the front of the room. Others stayed at their tables, refilling wine glasses and laughing too loud. Emily looked at the exit and calculated how long it would take to walk there. She could say she was not feeling well. She could claim an emergency at home. She could simply leave without explaining anything. No one would care. But as she reached for her purse, another round of comments started. A woman she barely knew leaned over from 2 tables away and called out with exaggerated cheer, "Emily, don't leave yet. The night is just getting started. Who knows? Maybe you'll find love tonight." The table erupted in laughter. A man added, "Yeah, Daniel's right there. You don't even have to look far." Emily stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, louder than she intended. The laughter around her faltered for half a second, then doubled. Someone whistled. Someone else clapped slowly. She felt her hands shaking and pressed them flat against her thighs. She had spent 3 years building a life where she did not need anyone's approval. 3 years proving she could raise her daughter alone, advance in her career alone, exist alone without apology. And now these people were reducing her to a punchline because she had the audacity to show up without a partner. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. What could she possibly say that would not make things worse? If she defended herself, they would call her sensitive. If she laughed along, they would think she agreed. There was no right answer. There never was. Daniel was still sitting. His expression had not changed. Emily felt a flash of frustration toward him. Why was he not saying anything? Why was he letting them do this? But then she remembered that he was as much a target as she was, maybe more. At least people pretended to care about her well-being when they meddled in her life. With Daniel, they did not even bother with pretense. They just dismissed him as boring and moved on. She grabbed her purse and turned toward the exit. The ballroom suddenly felt too small, too hot, too full of people who thought kindness was optional. She took one step, then another. Behind her, someone laughed again. She heard her name mixed with Daniel's in a sentence she did not fully catch. She kept walking. She was almost at the door when she heard a chair scrape behind her. She did not turn around. She did not want to see their faces. She pushed through the double doors and into the hallway, where the noise of the party became muffled and distant. The air was cooler here. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding. She hated that she cared. She hated that their words had gotten under her skin. She had survived worse than this: a divorce, single parenthood, sleepless nights, and impossible deadlines. But somehow, being laughed at in a room full of colleagues felt like a different kind of cruelty. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Emily opened her eyes and saw Daniel walking toward her. He moved slowly, deliberately, his hands in his pockets. When he reached her, he stopped a few feet away and met her gaze. His eyes were calm. There was no pity in them, no awkwardness, just a quiet understanding that made her throat tighten. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not apologize for the others. He just stood there, a silent presence that somehow made the hallway feel less empty. Emily realized she was holding her breath. She let it out slowly and felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. For the first time all evening, she did not feel like a joke. Emily wiped the corner of her eye quickly, hoping Daniel had not noticed. She was not crying. She refused to cry over people who did not matter. But her eyes stung anyway, and her chest felt tight. She turned toward the exit door at the end of the hallway, ready to leave the building entirely, when Daniel spoke for the first time that evening. They do this to everyone. His voice was quiet but steady, not apologetic, not angry, just factual. Emily stopped and looked back at him. He was still standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his expression unchanged. He continued without waiting for her to respond. They did it to a guy from IT last year, set him up with someone from payroll, made jokes all night. He quit 2 weeks later. Emily felt something shift in her chest. She had assumed she was alone in this, that maybe she was being too sensitive, that everyone else had thicker skin. But hearing Daniel acknowledge it so plainly made the knot in her throat loosen just slightly. She swallowed hard and looked down at her shoes. I should have known better than to come. Daniel shook his head once. You should be able to come without being treated like entertainment. There was no emotion in his voice, but the statement landed with unexpected weight. Emily met his eyes again and found herself searching for something. Judgment, maybe. Or pity. But all she saw was a tired kind of recognition, the look of someone who had endured the same treatment and learned to live with it. Before she could say anything, the double doors behind them swung open. A man from the marketing team stumbled out, drink in hand, his tie loosened, and his face flushed. He spotted them immediately and grinned wide. There you are. We thought you two ran off to make out in the parking lot. He laughed at his own joke and turned back toward the ballroom, shouting over his shoulder. Hey everyone, they're out here together. Emily's stomach dropped. Within seconds, a small crowd had gathered at the doors. Faces peered out, some amused, some curious, some already smirking with new material for their gossip. A woman from HR called out in a sing-song voice, Come back inside, you two. Don't be shy. Someone else added, Yeah, Daniel, don't let her leave. You finally got your shot. Emily felt her face burn. This was worse than before. Now they had a narrative. Now they had proof. She could already hear the rumors that would spread by Monday morning. She took a step back, ready to push past them and leave through the side door. But Daniel moved first. He walked calmly toward the crowd, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Emily thought he was going to apologize or laugh it off. Instead, he stopped in front of them and spoke in that same quiet, steady voice. We're coming back in. He glanced over his shoulder at Emily. If you want to. It was not a question. It was an offer. An opening. Emily stared at him, confused. Why would she want to go back in there? Why would he? But something in the way he stood there, unbothered by their laughter, made her reconsider. Maybe running away was exactly what they wanted. Maybe staying was the only way to take back control. She nodded once. Daniel stepped aside and gestured for her to go first. The crowd parted reluctantly, still snickering, still exchanging glances. Emily walked through them with her head up, her purse clutched tightly in one hand. She returned to their table and sat down in the same chair she had abandoned minutes earlier. Daniel followed and sat beside her. The ballroom had gone quiet, not silent, but quieter. People were watching now, whispering behind their hands. A man from the sales department stood up at a nearby table, his wine glass raised. "Look at that. They came back. I told you they were into each other." His words were slightly slurred, his grin obnoxious. A few people laughed. A woman sitting next to him added with exaggerated sympathy, "Aw, Emily, you're too picky. Daniel's not that bad. Give the guy a chance." Another voice chimed in from across the room. "Yeah, single mom standards. Am I right?" The laughter grew louder. Someone else shouted, "Come on, Emily. You're not getting any younger. Daniel's right there." The comments were piling up now, each one sharper than the last. Emily gripped the edge of the table and stared straight ahead. Her jaw was clenched so tight it ached. She wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them how cruel they were being. But her voice was stuck again, trapped somewhere between anger and humiliation. Then Daniel moved. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound cut through the noise like a blade. Conversations faltered. Laughter died mid-sentence. Emily looked up at him, confused. He reached down and took her hand. Not roughly. Not hesitantly. Just firmly. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Emily's breath caught. She did not pull away. She was too stunned to move. Daniel turned to face the room. His voice was still quiet, but it carried in a way it hadn't before. "That's enough." 2 words. Simple. Direct. The ballroom went completely silent. People stared at him like he had just spoken in a foreign language. Emily felt her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what he was doing, but she could not look away. A manager from operations, a man named Greg, who had been with the company for 15 years, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Whoa, Daniel. Didn't know you had it in you. You defending her now?" His tone was mocking, but there was an edge of curiosity beneath it. He glanced around the room, gauging reactions. "What? Are you too serious or something? Because that would be wild." Daniel did not flinch. He looked directly at Greg and spoke with the same calm authority. "I'm telling you to stop making jokes at her expense. She came here tonight because she was invited. She deserves to be treated with respect. So does everyone else in this room." His words were measured, deliberate. There was no anger in his voice, but there was something harder. Something unmovable. Greg laughed, but it sounded forced. "Dude, relax. We're just having fun. It's a party." He looked around for support, and a few people nodded, but most stayed quiet. The dynamic had shifted. Daniel was still holding Emily's hand. She realized suddenly that she was squeezing back. Her palm was warm against his. She did not remember deciding to hold on, but she was. A woman from accounting spoke up, her voice laced with false concern. "Daniel, we didn't mean anything by it. We were just trying to help Emily out. She's been single for so long, you know?" She smiled sweetly, as if her words were a kindness. "We thought maybe you two could connect. What's wrong with that?" Daniel turned his gaze to her. "What's wrong is that you're treating her personal life like it's your business. It's not. And you're doing it in a way that's meant to embarrass her. That's not help. That's cruelty." The word hung in the air. Cruelty. No one had called it that before. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few looked away. Emily felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. But this time, they were different. This time, They came from something other than shame. Greg stood up, his smirk fading. "Okay, man. I think you're overreacting. It was just a joke. We didn't mean anything serious." He gestured vaguely at the room. "Right, guys." A few people murmured agreement, but their voices were weak. The energy had changed. What had felt like harmless fun minutes ago now felt uncomfortable, exposed. Daniel finally let go of Emily's hand and took a step forward. "I'm not overreacting. I'm pointing out that what you think is funny is actually hurtful. And if you can't see that, then maybe you need to think harder about how you treat people." His voice did not rise. He did not need to shout. The quiet force of his words was enough. Greg opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, another voice cut through the room. The CEO, a tall man in his 60s named Robert Harris, had entered from a side door. He walked to the front of the ballroom with a microphone in hand, his expression unreadable. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for being late. I see we're having some interesting conversations tonight." His tone was light, but his eyes scanned the room with sharp awareness. He had clearly heard at least part of what had just happened. Robert tapped the microphone twice. "Before we wrap up for the evening, I'd like to invite someone to say a few words. Daniel Brooks, would you come up here, please?" The room went dead silent. Emily felt her stomach twist. She looked at Daniel, who had not moved. His expression was still calm, but there was something in his eyes now. Something she could not quite read. Greg let out a low whistle and muttered under his breath, "Oh, this is going to be good." A few people around him snickered nervously. Emily wanted to reach out and stop Daniel from walking up there. She had no idea what was about to happen, but every instinct told her that the night was about to take a turn none of them were prepared for. Daniel walked toward the front of the room. His steps were steady, unhurried. People watched him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. When he reached the stage, Robert handed him the microphone and stepped to the side. Daniel stood there for a moment, looking out at the crowd. Emily could see faces she recognized. The woman from accounting, the man from sales, Greg, still standing with his arms crossed, all of them waiting, all of them expecting him to stumble. Daniel raised the microphone. His voice filled the room, clear and steady. "I've been working here for 6 months. Most of you don't know me. Some of you probably don't even remember my name. And that's fine. I came here to do a job, and I've done it quietly." He let the words settle. "But tonight, I realized something. Staying quiet isn't always the right choice." Emily felt her heart hammering. She had no idea where this was going. Daniel's gaze swept across the room, and for a brief second, his eyes met hers. There was no fear in them, no hesitation, just resolve. "I came here to understand this company from the inside, to see how people really treat each other when they think no one important is watching." He let that sentence hang in the air. A few people exchanged confused glances. Greg's smirk had vanished. Daniel continued, his voice calm but firm. "And what I've seen tonight is exactly why I needed to be here." Robert stepped forward slightly, and for the first time, a faint smile crossed his face. Emily's confusion deepened. Something was happening. Something she did not understand yet. Daniel handed the microphone back to Robert and stepped aside. The CEO took center stage and spoke with quiet authority. "For those of you who don't know, Daniel Brooks is not just an employee. He's the founder of the parent company that acquired us 2 years ago. He stepped into this role to observe our workplace culture firsthand." The ballroom erupted, not with applause, with shock. People gasped. Someone dropped a glass. Greg's face went pale. Emily sat frozen in her chair, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. Daniel. Quiet, forgettable Daniel. The man they had mocked all night. He was the founder. He had been watching them the entire time. The silence that followed Robert's announcement was crushing. Emily stared at Daniel's back, her mind racing through every interaction they had shared. 6 months. He had been there for 6 months, sitting at that same desk on the 4th floor, eating lunch alone in the break room, nodding politely when people walked past him without a second glance. And all that time, he had been watching, listening, taking notes on exactly how they treated each other when they thought it did not matter. Greg's face had gone from pale to red. He sat down heavily, his earlier confidence completely gone. The woman from accounting looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Around the room, people were exchanging panicked glances, mentally rewinding every conversation they had ever had near Daniel, every joke they had made, every dismissive comment. Emily saw it all happening in real time. The realization, the fear, the desperate scrambling to remember if they had ever said anything directly cruel. Robert handed the microphone back to Daniel. The CEO's expression was neutral, but there was something approving in the way he stepped aside, giving Daniel the floor completely. Daniel held the microphone loosely, his posture relaxed. He did not look angry. He did not look triumphant. He just looked tired. "I want to be clear about something," Daniel said, his voice cutting through the nervous whispers. "I didn't speak up tonight because of my position. I didn't defend Emily because I have authority over you." He glanced toward their table, and Emily felt her breath catch. "I spoke up because I know exactly what she's going through. I'm a single parent, too. I have a son. He's 9 years old. And I've spent the last 4 years being judged for it in ways that most people don't even notice." The room stayed silent. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. A son. He had a son. All those evenings she had seen him leave exactly at 5. She had assumed he was just antisocial. She had never considered that he might have somewhere important to be. Someone waiting for him. Daniel continued, his tone measured. "People make assumptions when you're raising a child alone. They assume you're less committed to your job, less available, less reliable. They don't say it directly, but you can feel it in the way they assign projects, in the way they schedule meetings, in the way they talk about you when they think you can't hear." He let the words settle. "And tonight, I watched all of you do exactly that to Emily. You turned her life into a joke because it was easier than treating her like a person." A woman near the back stood up, her face flushed. Emily recognized her as someone from the legal department. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never would have." She stopped, her voice breaking slightly. Daniel shook his head. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat people with respect. Emily didn't deserve what happened tonight, regardless of whether I was here or not. The fact that you're only apologizing now because you found out I have power says more about this company culture than anything else I could have observed." The weight of his words hung over the room like smoke. Emily looked around and saw shame on faces that had been laughing just minutes before. Greg was staring at the table. The woman from HR had her hand over her mouth. Even the DJ had stopped the music. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Robert took the microphone back from Daniel. "I think we all have some reflecting to do tonight. This party is over. I'll be scheduling mandatory meetings next week to discuss workplace conduct and respect." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "Thank you all for coming. Drive safely." People began standing, gathering their coats and purses in uncomfortable silence. No one made eye contact. No one laughed. They filed out of the ballroom like children leaving the principal's office, their earlier energy completely drained. Emily stayed in her seat, unsure of what to do. Her hands were shaking, not from fear or embarrassment anymore, but from something else. Relief, maybe, or disbelief that someone had actually stood up for her. Daniel walked back to their table. He sat down in the same chair he had occupied all evening, the gray suit still slightly too large, his hair still combed neatly to the side. But everything about him felt different now. Not because of his title or his wealth, because he had shown her who he really was beneath the quiet exterior. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was soft, meant only for her. Emily nodded, then shook her head, then laughed weakly because she had no idea what she actually felt. Daniel's expression softened just slightly. "Yeah, me neither." They sat together as the room emptied around them. Waiters moved between tables, clearing plates and glasses with practiced efficiency. The gold ribbon on their centerpiece had come loose and was trailing across the tablecloth. Emily reached out and straightened it without thinking, her hands needing something to do. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally. "In the hallway. You could have said something." Daniel considered the question for a moment before answering. "Would it have changed anything?" He looked at her directly. "If I had told you I was the founder, would you have felt less humiliated by what they were doing? Or would you have just felt worse, knowing someone important had witnessed it?" Emily opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. It would have made everything more complicated. "I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything," Daniel continued. "I stood up for you because it was the right thing to do. Not because I expected gratitude, or because I wanted to use my position to impress you." He folded his hands on the table, the same careful gesture she had noticed earlier. "I just wanted you to know that you weren't alone, that someone saw what was happening and thought it was wrong." Emily felt tears building again, but this time she did not try to hide them. They slipped down her cheeks silently, and she wiped them away with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was ready to quit. After tonight, I didn't think I could come back and face them on Monday." Daniel shook his head. "Don't quit. Don't let them win." His voice was firm but kind. "You're good at your job. I've read your reports. I've seen the way you handle difficult clients. You deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." He leaned back slightly. "And besides, things are going to change. Robert meant what he said about those meetings. This company has a culture problem, and now that it's been exposed, we're going to fix it." Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the determination in his eyes. This was not just about tonight. This was about something bigger. He had spent 6 months observing, documenting, understanding the ways people hurt each other without realizing it. And now, he was going to do something about it. "Your son," she said softly. "What's his name?" Daniel's expression shifted, something warm breaking through the calm exterior. "Ryan. He's obsessed with dinosaurs right now. Drives me crazy with facts about the Cretaceous period." A small smile appeared. "He's staying with my sister tonight, probably buried in a book about velociraptors." Emily smiled back, her first real smile of the evening. "My daughter is Lily. She's 7. She asked me this morning why I was going to a party I didn't want to attend." Emily shook her head. "I told her sometimes adults do things because they're expected to." She said that sounded silly. Daniel laughed quietly. "Kids are smarter than we give them credit for." He glanced toward the exit, where the last few stragglers were leaving. "Do you want to get out of here? I can walk you to your car." Emily nodded and stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but she managed. She picked up her purse and followed Daniel toward the exit. The parking lot was cold and mostly empty. Their footsteps echoed on the pavement. Emily's car was parked near the back, under a streetlight that flickered intermittently. Daniel walked beside her, his hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the December air. When they reached her car, she turned to face him. "What happens now?" she asked. Daniel considered the question seriously. "Honestly, I don't know. I'll work with Robert to implement new policies. Sensitivity training, probably. Clear consequences for harassment." He met her eyes. "But culture change takes time. It won't fix everything overnight." Emily nodded. She understood that. She had spent 3 years learning that real change was slow and painful and often invisible until suddenly it was not. "I meant with us," she said quietly. Daniel's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. Emily felt her face heat up, but she did not look away. "I don't know what this is. I don't even know if it's anything. But I'd like to find out. If you would." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. "I'd like that too. But let's take it slow. No pressure. No expectations." He pulled out his phone and handed it to her. "Put your number in. We can get coffee sometime. Talk about our kids. Complain about work." Emily took the phone and typed in her information, her fingers clumsy from the cold. She handed it back and he saved the contact, then sent her a quick text so she would have his number too. Her phone buzzed in her purse. They stood there for another moment, neither of them ready to leave, but unsure what else to say. Finally, Emily unlocked her car and opened the door. "Thank you," she said again. "For tonight. For everything." Daniel nodded. "Drive safe. Text me when you get home so I know you made it." It was such a simple request, so ordinary, but it made Emily's chest warm. She got in the car and closed the door. Daniel stepped back and waited while she started the engine and pulled out of the parking space. She watched him in the rearview mirror, standing under the flickering streetlight, and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Hope, maybe, or just the possibility of it. When she got home 20 minutes later, she paid the babysitter and checked on Lily, who was fast asleep with a stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Emily stood in the doorway of her daughter's room and felt the weight of the evening finally lift. She had walked into that party expecting the worst and had gotten it. But she had also gotten something else. Someone who saw her, who understood, who stood up when it mattered. She pulled out her phone and sent Daniel a text. "Made it home. Thank you again." His response came less than a minute later. "Good. Get some rest. We'll talk soon." Emily set her phone on the nightstand and lay down on her bed, still wearing her dress from the party. She did not have the energy to change. She just closed her eyes and let herself breathe. For the first time in 3 years, she did not feel like she had to face everything alone. And that, she thought, as sleep began to pull her under, was worth more than any apology her coworkers could ever offer.